Rajivji, anything that is of real importance? I believe you had to talk about some important developments there.
Yes, yes. What is going on is this is primarily focused on H1s, although there are some developments that could affect the green card. But let's begin, first of all, with understanding where we are politically and how it affects our situation legally under immigration law for H-1Bs and tangentially for green cards.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is many times when a president is leaving the office, as Trump is, they tend to put into place a flurry of regulations, hoping to make something stick through the next administration. These sorts of rules are called midnight regulations because basically these regulations are likely to be changed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And President Biden's team has already said that as soon as President Biden gets sworn in, which is January 20th in exactly 7 days, according to the US time,
right,
they will that afternoon send out a memo that says all regulations that are not already in effect are frozen. So there are two sets of regulations, midnight regulations, that they have enacted. One set deals with the H-1B. I have written about that. I've talked about that quite extensively. I will cover that as the second part. But one part that we have not discussed recently is how does the Department of Labor regulation affect us? So what happens is this. Department of Labor a few months back came up with some regulations that completely changed the required salaries for H-1B holders and also for green card applications.
right.
The way they did that was they moved the scale up so that instead of selecting from the bottom of the averages, they started selecting from the top of the averages. With the result, the salary structure completely went, and now all of a sudden jobs that were supposed to be paid 40,000 have to be paid 60, 70, 80, or even more than 80, or more than double sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So they have actually completely skewed the field of required wages. What does that mean? You cannot file an H-1B unless you are paying a lot more money than you were before. And really, there is no justification for that. In fact, already it happens to us all the time. I will run into private employers who are doing high-tech businesses, who are doing an H-1B for the first time. And if I tell them, oh, even for out-of-school people, the salary is X $100,000, they just can't believe it. They say, well, we were hiring from the local market at 1/2 the amount. Why are the foreign workers supposed to be paid so much? So there is already a skew in the salaries in some areas. I wouldn't say that's true for all areas, but in some areas. In some other areas, the salaries might be depressed, but really that only shows that the data we are being asked to use as a baseline reference source is itself quite unreliable. What will happen? Well, both these regulations, the second one I'll talk about in a few seconds, both these regulations are likely to be frozen by President Biden's team. They will freeze them for a certain period of days. That remains to be seen how many days. They could also open them for further comment from the public. It's not easy to just dismiss a published regulation. They would have to come up with a regulation to overrule the regulation, from what I understand.
Okay.
But if the government gets sued, which they will be,
okay,
they can always walk away from the lawsuit and let the judge decide in our favor. That way the regulation is gone.
Mm-hmm.
You see my point? So if they just refuse to fight the regulation in court, we should be okay. Now, we don't know how it's going to go. I have talked to a lot of people in the industry, a lot of other lawyers, a lot of in-house counsel, because this has been a hot topic. And uniformly, there is a sense of hopefulness that no matter what happens, at least we will have consistency and dependability. Instead of a toddler making regulations, we have adults in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that makes for a big difference. And I think we don't need to panic. If these regulations can just go past this March, coming March, which I think they will, at least this year's H-1B will not be affected, and the green cards will not be affected for a long period of time. These regulations have a lot of problems, and I think they are both going to get defeated in courts. And if Biden administration just walks away from the regulations, that would help to make this easy for us. The second regulation that came up was the H-1B regulation, where the government said, well, look, we are considered the highest paid people for H-1B lottery. So if you are making the top level wage, you are almost 100% likely to be selected. If you are making level 3 wage, there are 4 basic levels. Level 3 wage, you will be almost 100% certain to be selected. If you are making a level 2 wage, you're about 75%. And level 1 wage, almost certainly you won't get in. What does that mean? Now, combine the fact that USCIS is saying you must be paid level 4 or level 3 salary, maybe level 2. And Department of Labor has raised the salaries tremendously. What they are trying to do is they are trying to take away all the international students out of the equation.
Okay.
Because if you get out of school, you're only going to get a level 1 job. And the rationale USCIS has presented for their rules is absolutely ludicrous. No lawyer worth any competence should be able to make such arguments with a straight face. One argument, they said, oh, this is actually good for the international students because their salaries will get jacked up. Wait a minute. Not only will the employers not be able to hire them even if they want to, because look at it this way. A lot of employers are already opening companies in other countries. Canada is an example where they can get visas a lot easier. And instead of hiring a US international student graduate in USA, they just take them to Canada.
Right.
Okay. So if you raise the salary to a level which is unaffordable for the local company, it becomes easier for them to just either outsource the work, because with today's telecommunications, you can be working from anywhere.
Right, absolutely. And that's become the new normal as it is during this COVID times. And people who were not used to working from home have also gone that way. So Rajivji, here, I just want to know, like you just said, it would be difficult for employers in the United States to hire a new talent, so to say. So, and there was a time when, outsourcing was also an issue. So what kind of an impact do you see overall? Would there be a limit on the outsourcing work? How do you foresee that?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's take a step back and I'll address your question in 1 second.
Right.
Let me finish the logical presentation of the government for supporting their regulations. So one thing they said was, oh, it's actually going to be good because their salaries are going to get hiked up. Well, first of all, you have not considered the smaller businesses. Small businesses, 80% of the economy, maybe more. I don't remember the exact figures. You have completely priced out the small business from this equation. Number one. Number two, you've priced out all the level 1, level 2 people. Combine the Department of Labor action with the H-1B action from the USCIS, you may have completely destroyed the H-1B system except for a very small percentage of people. That's not going to help this economy.
Right.
When you make a decision without proper study, decision that can be disastrous, these people in the White House have not considered anything about what they're doing. So with that, luckily, I think these regulations will get frozen. And I think we will be able to revert to our last year's lottery system, and we'll be able to make it through this year. But I also think that it's going to be a comprehensive legal immigration reform. So we'll see now that we have, like I said, adults in the house. I think we will have much more rational decision making. I don't have any problem with government stepping in and correcting the problems, but I have a problem when the government tries to destroy a program without sufficient knowledge, understanding, or study of the problem. So we'll see how it works out. But overall, if I were to give a message to everybody out there, don't worry, guys, this is going to be okay. Just sit tight. It's a fast developing situation. Let's see how it works out. I am very hopeful things will be taken care of. Coming back to your question, which you were talking about, that what's going to happen to outsourcing and what does the industry business overall look like? Well, first of all, like I told you, there are companies who have moved to our own clients, who moved to, or they have started operations in Canada because they just were sick and tired of the uncertainty of immigration in the United States. Some of these are product companies, some are cloud-based products, some are telecommunication, Wi-Fi products. They just couldn't deal with this stuff here. Okay.
Right.
Now, a lot of countries are trying to hire away the talent, including the talent that has been studying in the United States. When I first started my practice of law in 1993, my individual practice, before that I was with different firms, the first thing I learned in business immigration was capital follows talent. Wherever talent goes, that's where money goes. Unfortunately, we would have learned that a very hard way if Trump had stayed in power. I'm that the incoming administration will at least study the problem more thoroughly. What is going to happen? I think they will study, they probably will at least for the time being maintain status quo before making big drastic changes. That would be my guess.
Right.
And I have seen Mr.
Yes, Rajiv.
Biden's agenda. I like the way he's thinking because he said, look, first of all, how many H1s should be issued should not be an arbitrary number that was decided back in, I don't know, 1990s. For 30 years, we haven't studied this problem. Second, I think there are problems with the H-1B system and they should be corrected if they are hurting the US labor force. And I'm all for it.
Right,
And the third thing he said was he also wanted to create some special provisions for local hiring. So for instance, if in California they need more software engineers, he might be inclined to create some special provisions for local hiring of international talent in California locally if it's not being done within the United States. So these are things that I like. These are products of a rational mind. Laws should not be a product of a chant. Lock her up, lock her up. That's not a law. That's a chant. So I'm hoping things will only get better. Kamalji, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Rajivji. So I was, we're talking about students who plan to study in the United States and then be hired there, of course, and then even the local companies. We just talked about the problem. I was looking at the other way around where, we've had the last data saying over, lakhs of students coming in from India, from China to the United States for their masters and higher courses. Do you see a decline there, people moving, not to the US universities because they do not see a kind of a, stepping stone thereafter, moving to countries like Canada? Would it also have an effect on education, the education universities? So do you see an impact on the education sector as well?
I am pretty sure there is. I have not looked at the figures. When I did look at them the last time, there was a drastic change downwards. But I think the worst is over. All four fingers crossed on both hands. I'm pretty sure the worst is over. I think we're going to be fine. Adults are back in charge.
So thank you so much, Rajivji.
Yes, to our listeners, folks, everybody, thanks for tuning in. And please stay safe. Keep those masks on. And